Maybe a little bit misleading, why it's forbidden to, thank you. Okay. The topic I chose may be a little bit misleading, why it's forbidden to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. I don't mean to be discussing a halachic issue. I want to look at the idea of not learning Torah on Tisha B'Av from a philosophical point of view, which is my usual focus, but in this case, the philosophy has a lot to do with the experience of learning Torah. And therefore it encompasses a certain amount of psychological material. Thank you very much. And those of you who listen to my shiurim are aware that I make a great effort to speak with precision, exact formulations, and exact reasoning. When we're talking about experience, it's not as easy to do that, at least not for me. So some of what I say won't be as precise as I would like to make it, but I hope that it'll be suggestive and helpful in any case. What we need to do is have some understanding of what the study of Torah is, and as I said, experientially. And then, Tisha B'Av is not the only time when the study of Torah is forbidden, so we need to do some comparisons. And at the outset, I should point out that the study of Torah is not totally forbidden. There are certain things that you can study, like the book of Job, or the passages in Moed that talk about the laws of mourning. The idea is that study of Torah can distract you from the psychological focus you're supposed to have on Tisha B'Av, and that would be accomplished by both the actual study, the condition of studying, and also the subject matter. And when the subject matter itself is close to the subject of Tisha B'Av, then it was felt that it won't, even though the experience of studying could be a distraction, that it won't be too great a distraction to be tolerated. Now, one tip-off that something special is going on in the study of Torah is the blessing that we make in the morning over the mitzvah of studying Torah. It starts off, "Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, sanctified us by His commandments, and commanded us to occupy ourselves with words of Torah." That's not an obvious formulation. That's what we're supposed to be doing, occupied. How about learning? How about understanding? How about remembering? How about applying? How about, why would the choice of word be occupying? And even more puzzling and challenging is the very next words, "V'harevna shemelkeinu es diris orasecha b'finu v'fiyas Yisrael." Make them sweet. Make the words of Torah sweet in our mouths, the mouths of the nation, the people of children of Israel. Make them sweet. We don't have any such petition for any other mitzvah. And in a certain way, it could seem that this would compromise the quality of the mitzvah, because we have a rule. From tzara agra, the more effort, the more strain, the more pain that's involved in performing the mitzvah, the greater the reward you get. And if they're going to be sweet, wouldn't that compromise doing it for God's sake? Maybe I'm doing it for the sweetness' sake. So then not only will I not get the reward for the effort and the strain and the suffering, but my motivation will be impure. I'll be doing it selfishly, for the sake of the sweetness. So, something has to be done to explain this before we can even appreciate what's going on in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. As far as the first vocabulary is concerned, be occupied with, there's a famous statement of the Chafetz Chaim. When you complete a tractate, there's a certain ceremony that you go through, which includes the recitation of a particular text. And a little snippet of the text reads as follows. It contrasts those who have the merit to study Torah with those who don't, even in particular those who are in trades and other occupations. And then the words are, Anu amelim, ahem amelim, we expend effort, they expend effort. Anu amelim v'chal b'schar, we expend effort and receive a reward. Hem amelim v'edim v'chal b'schar, and they expend effort and they don't receive a reward. Really? The Chafetz Chaim says, let's ask, people aren't learning Torah, and they're expending effort, they don't get a reward? And he gave the example of a shoemaker. Now, today when you buy shoes, you go into a shop that has 500 boxes. Those days, you went and they measured your foot, and then they made shoes for you. It was tailor-made. But he measures the foot, he makes the shoe, and you go in and you pay for them. What do you mean that they're expending effort and not receiving a reward? So the Chafetz Chaim says, what happens if the shoemaker measures your foot, come back 2 weeks later with the finished shoes and they don't fit? Do you pay? Certainly not. He made an effort and he didn't get a reward. Now, superficially, what would be comparable to that? Well, I came to the yeshiva this morning. I sat my cherusa and we're working on a Tosfos. Someday you'll learn that Tosfos is very hard. And we struggled over for 3 hours and we didn't get it. So now, should we say, well, you didn't get it, so too bad, it was a bust. You're not getting a reward for not getting it. No, you do get reward for not getting it. We expended effort and we do get reward, even though the goal to which we expended the effort was not achieved. Well, now let's hold on. The goal toward which we expended the effort was not achieved? Really? Well, if it really wasn't achieved, how come we're getting a reward? That's because in saying the previous sentence, there's a mistake in the goal. The goal is not to understand the Tosfos. Or to put it this way, maybe I should say it more carefully. Maybe my goal was to understand the Tosfos, that's a worthy goal, but the divine purpose of the activity is not dependent upon understanding the Tosfos. Because the bracha was la'asoik b'divrei Torah, to be occupied with the words of Torah. Was I occupied all morning with the words of Torah? You bet I was. You bet I was. I was struggling to understand the Tosfos. And since that's the mitzvah, I performed the mitzvah, even though I didn't come to a goal. So, it means that, unlike the shoemaker, where everything depends upon the success of the shoes fitting, and the effort he put in trying to make the shoes fit counts for nothing, here, being occupied with the effort of learning Torah satisfies the mitzvah. Even though you don't get the product that you were looking for, which was the understanding of the Tosfos, you did succeed in doing the mitzvah of expending your time trying to understand Torah. But then this makes this mitzvah different from other mitzvos. Let me make one more remark, which may be a little subtle. Ramchal says in the Derech Hashem that the reward you get is proportional to how much effort you put into trying to do the mitzvah, any mitzvah. But there, you may put the effort in and fail to do the mitzvah, and you get rewarded for the effort. That's not the same as putting in the effort and succeeding in doing the mitzvah. Here, putting in the effort to understand the Tosfos is the mitzvah. There's anything else to it. Whether you understand the Tosfos or don't understand the Tosfos isn't relevant. So it's being occupied with the words of Torah. Okay, now let's figure out what you're occupied with and what effect that should have on you. There's a Gemara in Brachos which asks the following question. We have a kind of suffering which are called Yisurim Shel Ahava, suffering that is brought upon the person out of God's love. The suffering is designed to benefit him in a particular way. Everything is designed to benefit a person, but in a particular way, and they're designated as sufferings that are brought about as a sign of God's love, and there's certain conditions under which that happens. But the Gemara asks, how could I know if I'm suffering whether these are sufferings of divine love or not? And the Gemara gives two independent criteria in the mouths of two different authorities, but I don't think they disagree. One is that if the sufferings make it impossible for you to study Torah, then they are not sufferings motivated by God's love. And the other is that if the sufferings make it impossible for you to pray, then they are not sufferings motivated by God's love. Now you read that Gemara, the first thing you ask is, how did Chazal pick those two examples? Okay, studying Torah, it's a vast literature on how important studying Torah is. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam says over and over again. Very good. Okay, so I see why studying Torah is essential, but prayer? According to all of the medieval authorities except for the Maimonides, prayer is rabbinic. Organized, institutionalized prayer 3 times a day, special time, special text is rabbinic. Everybody agrees that prayer during times of distress, asking for salvation, is biblical. But that might not happen for weeks or weeks or months and months or years and years. Daily, everyday prayer, and certainly 3 times a day, is only rabbinic. So if you're going to take Talmud Torah and say, Talmud Torah is so important that if the suffering interferes with that, we won't call it God's love. And now I'll give you a free choice. What would you pick for the number 2? If the sufferings interfere with Q, then also it's not a sign of God's love. I would pick Shabbos. I would pick honoring one's parents. I would pick charity, justice. I mean, there are lots of mitzvahs that are really very, very important. And I would say, if the suffering makes it impossible for me to perform that mitzvah, okay, then it's so important that I wouldn't call it God's love. But prayer, why would that be? I think the answer is because prayer and Talmud Torah together form 2 halves of a dialogue. In prayer, I'm talking to him, and in Talmud Torah, he's talking to me. Communicating with me. Does it really matter whether I hear prophecy in my ear or he writes me a book? He's communicating with me. What the Gemara is saying is, sufferings of love would not interrupt the dialogue. It would not interrupt the dialogue. And there's a little bit of indication that it's a dialogue because someone who's totally occupied with learning Torah doesn't pray. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't pray. He did the other mitzvos, but not prayer. Why would prayer be different? He did put on tefillin, he did say Shema, did make Kiddush Friday night, but not prayer. Because when God's talking to you, don't interrupt. The fact that he's talking to you is more important than you're talking to him. So that means we have to understand that when we're learning Torah, we're receiving a communication from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, I'm going to step outside my circle and date myself by quoting Avdol, a well-known American, I think he was Canadian actually, intellectual, a fellow named Marshall McLuhan, who became famous for a number of things. One was saying the medium is the message. Okay, it's not exact and it's exaggerated and so forth and so on, but the medium is certainly part of the message. The fact that so-and-so is communicating with me is a part of the experience different from the actual words spoken, the actual ideas expressed. The same words coming from somebody else wouldn't have the same meaning. And to a certain extent, depending upon who the interlocutor, the sender is, maybe the words pale into insignificance against the fact that he's speaking to me. I'll give you a very rough example. I don't know if you've ever seen this happen. It has happened on occasion. The President of the United States is signing a bill into law in the Rose Garden or wherever else he does it. And the people who helped him pass it in Congress, people who framed it and so forth and so on, are there to help him celebrate. He takes out his pen and he starts to sign his name and the pen runs out of ink. Feels in his pocket, he hasn't got another pen. So he says, turns to you, you're standing there to celebrate also. Could I use your pen? He's going to use your pen to sign this into American law. Yes, yes, use my pen. Take the picture, use my pen. Yeah, very good, very good. He signs it, he hands it to you, signing, no, keep it. By all means, keep it. You know, use my pen. Because the President of the United States is using your pen. There, the pen makes no difference. And if it was a pitchfork, or it was a computer console, or it was sunglasses, what difference would it make? You're making a contribution to the President of the United States. It's the person-to-person interaction, not the item that's transacted, that makes the difference here. Similarly in communication. Suppose, that's my insulin pump. That was every time. Okay, fine. Stop yelling. There we go. Imagine that someone who's very precious called you in and said, I need to tell you something. And he tells it to you, and you don't understand it. But he hasn't got more time, so you leave. He told me X, Y, Z. What am I supposed to do with that? And you ask other people. You don't get it. You just can't decipher it. Of course, you feel a tremendous loss that you can't understand what he told you. But he called you in. He called you in to talk to you. You won't lose that. You'll tell that to your grandchildren. You know, so-and-so, that great so-and-so, once he called me in alone, personally, to talk to me. So part of what's going on here is I'm occupying myself with the communication from the creator of the universe. The one who appeared to our ancestors at Sinai, the one who guided our forefathers and matriarchs to create a nation that could stand at Sinai, the one who freed us from Egypt, the one who's been exercising individual providence on the nation and on the individual Jews down through history. He's communicating with me. He's given me a communication. The very fact that I'm receiving communication from him has a very special quality. Now, what is that special quality? Well, it's a sense of privilege. It's a sense of a precious relationship. We spoke a few weeks ago about the relationship between love and awe of God and how they could live together, because when he invites you to a relationship, the very distance between you and him is what creates the love that overcomes that distance. When you know that even though he's so augustly greater than you are, and you're so little and insignificant and unworthy, he wants to have a relationship with you, that generates the love. So here is a direct expression of the love. He sent you a communication. He wants you to be occupied with this because of his concern for you, investment in you, and his love for you. Now, in a certain sense, the petition that the words should be sweet in your mouth reflects that reality. If you're studying the communication that was given to you by the creator of the universe, who's called Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven, and it isn't sweet, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. You're not there. You're not present. You're not experiencing what's really happening. Imagine one of your parents was at a terrible accident, is in danger of dying, and undergoing surgery, and you're watching the surgery. And little by little, the surgeon is succeeding in the operation. He's halfway through. Are you going to be sitting there and looking at your watch and thinking, I have an appointment at 4 o'clock, I wonder if I'll make it. Yeah, okay, he tied off that blood vessel. Well, no more blood. I wonder how the stock market is doing. Is that likely? You're watching your mother having an operation. I don't think so. I think you'll be looking, you'll be frightened that something will go wrong. Each thing that goes right, you have a thrill of pleasure. Wow, he did that, and he did that. There's only 6 to go. Maybe she'll make it. How wonderful. If you are blasé and think about the stock market, something's wrong with you. Something in your psychology is crippled. This petition is a petition, among other things. I would never say the whole of what a chazal means. But this petition is, let me be aware of and sensitive to what's really going on here. And if so, it'll become sweet that way. It's only if I lose sight of what's going on that it won't be sweet. That answers the question as to maybe because I want them to be sweet, I'll do them shalol lishma, I'll do it for the sake of the sweetness. This is not vanilla ice cream. The sweetness comes from doing it right. The sweetness comes from doing it with a fully present experience of the reality that you're dealing with. If you're doing it as a communication from the creator of the universe who loves you and is investing in you, and you appreciate that, that's where the sweetness comes from. You're not going to be able to do that for the sweetness of the taste. You won't get this sweetness of this taste unless you're doing it in the right way in the first place. Okay, now, that sense of connection, that sense of being cared for, that sense of being close isn't experienced equally at all times. And it's an interesting question whether it should be experienced equally at all times. Is this one of these a chumash? There's a very interesting verse. Thank you. Yeah, so this is on page 1096, 1097. This is in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 31. This is verse 17. This is talking about punishment for deserting the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Oh, we can start with 15. Hashem appeared in the tent, the pillar of cloud. The pillar of cloud stood by the entrance of the tent. Hashem said to Moses, "Behold, you will lie with your forefathers." I don't know why, but and this people will rise up and stray after the gods of foreigners of the land in whose midst it is coming. I will forsake me and annul my covenant that I have sealed with it. Okay. The Jewish people are going to desert Hashem. My anger will flare against it on that day, and I will forsake them. I will conceal my face from them, Hester Panim. And they will become prey, predators will attack them, and many evils and distresses will encounter it, meaning the people. the people will say on that day. Check the translation here. Is it not because my God is not in my midst that these evils have come upon me? Now the commentators are split as to how to understand this. One take it as a confirmation of their evil. What they're saying is that these evils have befallen me because there's no divine providence. So therefore we're abandoned to chance and nothing's guiding the events. That's absolute heresy. That's something which is absolutely wrong. Others take it positively. When we live up to the requirements that Kodesh Baruch Hu set for us, we qualify for a certain type of divine providence, which includes protection. When we fail to live up to it, we are governed by a different type of divine providence, which doesn't include protection. And it's true, because he's not in our midst, meaning he's not revealing himself in our midst, because of the transgressions that we've performed, that these things are happening to me. And that's correct. He isn't revealing himself. So now the question is, seeing it from the correct side, how do you react to that? How do you respond to that? What do you do about that? You've made these mistakes, because Baruch Hu has withdrawn his revealed presence, and because of that you don't have the protection that you usually have and that you were promised. What do you do about that? And from the way in which those commentators take this verse, the first thing you have to do is realize it. Realize it. Don't run for it. Don't hide from it. Don't paper it over with pious cliches. Face the fact that because of your failure, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has withdrawn the revelation of his presence. And then take steps from there. You want to ask a question?
Yeah, I wonder, is it that the providence is withdrawn, or is it even a step further? Because it sounds like the providence is actually turning against them. It sounds like there's intentional...
No, you didn't listen carefully to what I said.
Okay.
I said that there are different types of divine providence. And when you are obeying what God wants from you, then divine providence normally involves protection from calamity. And what they're saying is, since I failed to follow what Hashem wants me to do, therefore the kind of providence which protects me from divine providence, from calamity, has been withdrawn, and has been replaced by another kind of divine providence, which doesn't protect from calamity. The idea that there's no divine providence is the idea that God has abandoned the world to chance. That's a non-idea.
No, that I'm saying that it's replaced with a kind of providence that doesn't just not protect me from calamity, it brings calamity upon me.
Oh, I don't think that's where your words were going, but okay. The answer to that is yes and no. Real Jewish answer. Because, it's a little bit like this. Let's suppose George is a target for assassins, and he knows that, and he hires a defense team, and the defense team is terrific. The assassins cannot get through. They don't stop trying, but assassins cannot get through. But poor George, he's cheap. And a couple of months he doesn't pay their salary, goes to Acapulco instead, right? And the defense team says, that's it. We're not protecting him. And one night, a machine gun burst of bullets, chops through his villa, and he ends up with a bullet in the arm, a bullet in the leg, right? Now, the protection service arranged it so that he should get hit, but they didn't pull the trigger. if you are asking about the responsibility of the protection service, I think you could convict them of irresponsibility. That's not the same as pulling the trigger. So it's something like that. These are the things where Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Miyachad Shmo Al Hara. Because Baruch Hu doesn't identify his name directly with evil. So it's that, I'm just hinting that it's not quite so simple. The Rambam says everything God does is good, doesn't do any evil at all. So at any rate, what's the first thing that you do when you recognize that the providence has been shifted and you no longer enjoy that expression of God's presence? Well, the first thing you do is don't pretend nothing's happened. Don't just carry on as usual. Like the guy who was watching the operation on his mother and checking the stock market. Now this happens when there's a death of a relative, also forbidden to study Torah. When you're mourning. So there is a sense in which you feel a shift in God's concern and a shift in God's connection, and which the first thing you have to do is recognize that. Don't pretend that it isn't so. And in the process of learning Torah, if you're going to have the sweetness of learning Torah, and the sweetness is from a realization, the experiential realization that the Creator is crafting a message for you in order to be close to you, in order for you to feel close and beloved and cared for and all the rest, that experience is going to make it very difficult for you to register the fact that the providence has shifted to the point where you're not being treated that way anymore. Maybe he feels that it's behind the screen. He's not evidencing it. Right? Now, the situation is subtle because, some of you know this even before I tell you, the Mishnah Bracha says that you bless God for the bad things as well as you bless Him for the good things, even though it's a different blessing. For the good things, either you make a shechayanu or a tova meitiv, and for the bad things, you make a bracha of dayina emes. But you make a blessing for both, and it says that when you make the blessing of dayina emes, the judge of truth, for the bad things that happen, even so you should make the blessing with joy. And the question is, why should you make the blessing with joy? If you look up in the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch copies the words of the Torah word for word, it says something very profound. It says, this is based on the Bach and others, that, let me just put it in a little context. When you make the blessing of something good, you make the blessing because you enjoy and appreciate and value the good thing that happened, and you're blessing God for it. Say, when you make the blessing of something bad, it says it's supposed to be made with joy, they say it's impossible to enjoy the bad thing. The blessing can't be on the event. If you're going to make the blessing with joy, it cannot be on the event. That's a striking, interesting idea. Challenging to some people who have very simplistic ideas of what religious life is about. It's impossible to accept with joy that event. So the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch say, no, you're in pain. You're in pain. And yet you have mitzvahs to do. And since you have mitzvahs to do, God has given you a requirement of serving Him in a very difficult, painful environment. And that's a precious divine directive. He's given you a very difficult mitzvah to do. And if you succeed in doing it, you'll have done something great. Some kind of avodah, service of God that's great. And the joy is in having the opportunity to do that divine service. The joy is not on the event that happened. No one's supposed to be joyful that his father died. But when your father dies, Rahman al-Islam, and you're devastated and you're psychologically, emotionally broken and so forth and so on, and you have to daven. And you have to put on tefillin. And you have to make brachos and bench. That's a very difficult service to do with joy. And the joy comes from the fact that Kodesh Baruch Hu asked me to serve him in very difficult conditions. It's like, lahavdil, the example that I always give about the Navy SEALs, who volunteered to undertake a mission which is dangerous and possibly deadly, to save some American diplomat who's in danger. And they volunteer to do it because they say, that's what I was trained for. That's what I and only I can do. Nobody else can do this. And it's something that needs to be done. So it's my privilege to undertake the danger and everything else. So here, the person says, Kodesh Baruch Hu, because my parent died, because I'm the one who's sitting Shiva for him, Kodesh Baruch Hu has chosen me for a very precious service, and my simcha is in the fact that he chose me for that service. That you have when you're mourning but you've been chosen for a difficult service, and it gives you joy that you were chosen for that service. That's not the same as having your father's arm around your shoulders. Typically, the Navy SEAL is sent to Afghanistan, or for Nigeria, or to Argentina or something else. Doesn't do it in Ohio. So there's a question of registering distance when the distance is real. And that's why the study of Torah isn't done. Because the study of Torah, you feel your father's arm around your shoulders. And that's not where it is now. That's not where it is now. And something like that is going on in Tisha B'Av. Study of Torah, the idea of think of the Churban Habayis, the destruction of the temple. The temple housed Kodesh Baruch Hu's spirit. The Shekhinah was there. It was manifest. In the first temple, there were 10 continuous miracles, visible miracles. You could see the symptoms of Hashem's presence with your own eyes. And now that's being destroyed. Second temple didn't have it. According to the Tosfos Yeshanim in Yuma, Second temple didn't have those 10 miracles. Because Baruch Hu's revelation of his presence is going to be evaporated. Our sources tell us that Kodesh Baruch Hu's presence was manifest in Gan Eden as a result of the sin and succeeding deteriorating generations. God's presence moved. There are 7 things called heavens, so to speak. It moved up to the 7th heaven, as far removed from the land, from the world as possible. Kodesh Baruch Hu Iva Dira B'Tachsonim. Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to dwell, show his presence on earth with us. Then came the patriarchs, Egypt, and all the rest. There were 7 stages until the tabernacle was built, and Hashem's presence returned to the world the way similar to what it was in Gan Eden. Now that's being destroyed. Don't tell me he has his arm around your shoulders. He's retreating. That manifestation is retreating. We're commemorating the retreat of that manifestation. If the learning of Torah is going to be experientially with his arm around your shoulders, it's wrong. It distracts you from the reality. It doesn't enable you to register the reality. I'll give you another indication of this. Chazal tell us that when the Babylonians conquered Yerushalayim, and first they did abominations in the temple, and then on the 9th of Av, towards evening, they set it alight, and it burned all night into the next morning. That's why we still have restrictions until noon of the 10th. So I believe it's Rabbi Yehuda who said, if I had been there to set up the commemoration of the destruction of the temple, I would have said to make it on the 10th, not on the 9th. It was only ignited at the end of the 9th. The vast majority of the burning took place on the 10th. Okay. But the rest of the Rabbanim didn't agree with him, and it's on the 9th. Why is it on the 9th? So I heard from Rabbi Soloveitchik in Boston many years ago. He said because God's presence abandoned the building on the 9th. As long as God's presence was manifested in the building, it couldn't be burnt, couldn't be destroyed. We're commemorating the loss of God's presence. We're not commemorating the burning down of a building. This is the tragic, tragic mistake. Every year, I'm not going to check, but you can check, and I'm sure you'll find the learned appeals. Why are you crying when Jerusalem's rebuilt, and we have control, and there are soccer stadiums, and concert halls, and museums, and soccer fields, and what are you talking about destruction? To them I say, the blessing in the Shemona Esrei, which asked the rebuilding of Jerusalem, says, please return to Jerusalem and establish your presence within it. And then, number 3, rebuild it. We're not talking about bricks and tar for roads and radio stations and so forth and so on. The first 2 are restore your presence, and then have the city built as a recognition for the fact that you've restored your presence. And they think that the bricks and the radio stations and the concert halls should cause us to stop mourning the destruction of Jerusalem. It's not over yet. Bricks and tar don't do that, nor do symphony orchestras. So the learning of Torah on Tisha B'Av is going to distract us from the concentration of the fact of loss and devastation. We take down the parochas, the decoration of the ark. Take it off. Decoration is a sign of joy and honor and glory, and we haven't got it. It's customary to pray quietly. Not to pray with confidence and exaltation. No. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. End of the evening prayer, we don't say tiskabel. Please have our prayer answered. Can't say that. Can't say that. In the afternoon, it's relaxed. That's for another reason. But this is the idea of focusing on the loss. And the study of Torah will distract us from that. Now, that means another way to put the nature of Talmud Torah the rest of the year is that we should rejoice in the presence. That's what I said when I talked about the blessing. And I want to add to this. I was going to do this next week, and maybe I'll do it again next week, but it fits in here very well. My Rabbi Zatzal told us that when you think about the destruction of the temple, let me say it better. When you think about the temple of the past and our present relationship, it has 2 facets. And they have 2 different titles in the language of Chazal. One is Zeichel Churban, and the other is Zeichel Mikdash. They're not synonymous. Zeichel Churban literally means remembering the destruction. Zeichel Mikdash means remembering the temple. And the message is that the temple has a double relationship to us. One is that it was destroyed, and we register that by putting ashes on the forehead of a bridegroom and smashing the glass at the wedding and leaving a section of the wall of an apartment that was built for a Jew. According to the halach, if it wasn't built for a Jew, you don't have to do it. If you acquire an apartment from a non-Jew, you don't have to sandblast part of the wall and make it. You can do it, but you don't have to. It's only if it was built for a Jew. Meaning that when it's built for a Jew, it wasn't completely built. But part of it is it right? These are things which you do to register the destruction of the temple. But for example, at the Passover Seder, when we eat the matzah and maror together, we say Zech L'Mikdash Kehillel, members of the temple, the way Hillel used to eat his Pesach matzah and maror together, so we eat matzah and maror together. We are not introducing mourning into the Passover Seder. When we take the lulav for 6 days, 7 minus Shabbos, whereas that was only done in the temple. Biblically, it's only done in the temple. The rest of the world is only done for 1 day. Yochanan Zakkai said, do it 7 days to remember the temple. We're not introducing mourning into the taking of the lulav. No, what we're saying is that something of the temple still exists. There's some element of the temple that's still in existence, and we're relating to its present existence. And relating to the temple and being worthy of having it rebuilt incorporates the double realization. Of course, you have to feel devastated that it was destroyed. But if you don't prize and celebrate what's left, then you're not appreciating what it meant, because it still means that. You have to feel a certain connection when you do Zecher L'Mikdash. And both are required for you to be. But of course, the question is, you don't do them simultaneously. You do them in different contexts. But the how shall I say, the comprehensiveness of your relationship to the temple has to incorporate both. So when you are studying Torah and you feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's closeness and presence and care, concern and investment, that's appropriate. And when, on Tisha B'Av, or when you're an oval, you have to register the lack of that presence in your life. I mean, the Chazal have a very dramatic way of putting this. If a member of the immediate family dies, the whole family should feel that the sword is stretched out over them, that they're in danger, because the merit of the family didn't save him, did it? It was not only a judgment on the person who died, it's a judgment on those who are close to him. They didn't deserve to have him for longer. So then the family has to register that difference in quality of the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu was relating to them. And I'll add one more thought to this, and then I'm going to quit. In the priestly blessing, the middle verse, Yoer Hashem panav elecha, Hashem should shine His face upon you. Poetry, obviously. What does it stand for? So Ramchal says that events happen. Sometimes the events, let's say a sequence of events or several different simultaneous events, have a certain complexion. They have a certain complexion, as if an attitude was being expressed. I'll give you a little example. Hayom etem yotzei mechodesh ha'aviv. You're leaving Egypt. Remember, you left in the springtime. Really? Really? Is that so important? Yeah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu even cared about the weather. He even cared about the weather. It should be comfortable. It's a little thing. It's an adverb. But it gives a complexion to the whole set of events. Care, concern, like a parent concerned for a child, wanting everything to be pleasant. Other than, well, you've been enslaved, you've been in chains, that's not good. The Egyptians are evil, I'm going to punish them, and you'll go free. Have a nice time. It's not the same complexion at all. Both cases you go free, but the complexion of the event is different. So the bracha is, Kodesh Baruch Hu, the complexion you should give to the events is a shining face. There are lots of complexions. Here, the complexion is one of either displayed anger or turning away. You don't see his face? No, I don't want you to see my face. You're having an interview with someone, he says, end of interview. Goodbye. Something's different now. He doesn't want to see you anymore. Especially if it hasn't been a pleasant interview. It can be devastating. And here, I'll give you another complexion. Right, the end of an interview can be devastating. So the keruvim, the cherubim, the angels out of gold on top of the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies, didn't always stay in the same position. We are told that sometimes they were observed embracing when HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship to the Jewish people was one of an embrace, and sometimes they were standing distant, they could be back to back. They had different positions. When the Babylonians came in and destroyed the temple, the keruvim were observed embracing. What? Temple's being destroyed, and they're embracing? So they explain, right, because you're going to exile. So we're going to exile. Why are you showing us a picture of embrace? And it's the farewell. I'm embracing you because we're parting. That's very different from being given a slap in the face and being chased out the door, isn't it? And the embrace there is to teach you that's not the complexion of the event. The complexion of the event is that a parent is sending away his child because for some reason the child doesn't deserve to be in the context of the parent, and the parent's going to grieve over it also. And the parent's waiting for it to be over. And the parent's giving a farewell embrace so as to say, I'm waiting for you to come back. That gives the whole exile an entirely different complexion. So Kadosh Baruch Hu communicates to us in the complexions of events. And it's our job to register the complexion of the events. That's why we're told in exile, Ezu Seifus Krisus, show me the bill of divorce that I gave you. You think you're abandoned? You think I don't want you anymore? Where did I divorce you? I pushed you out of the house because you violated the house. You profaned the house. I didn't divorce you. This idea of the complexion of events is a very deep idea, and it's almost, I would say, universal. Even if the events are a jumble, the jumble is the complexion of unreadability. Sometimes a person looks at you and you think, I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what's going on in his mind. His expression is inscrutable, as they say. You can't scrute it. So, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and then, as I said at the beginning of this year, we have to register that. To register that, focus on that, and reflect it in the way that we interact. And part of that, on Tisha B'Av, where it comes to a climax, is not learning Torah. Okay, well, as I said at the beginning, I don't feel that this discussion has been fully precise and well-defined and all the rest, which is my effort always to try to accomplish, but I hope that it's suggestive and helpful anyway.